I think a lot of people misunderstand social and emotional learning. And so what I'd like to do today is to clarify and expand our thinking about it a little bit in terms of 4 big ideas. Number 1, that social and emotional and character development, which we'll talk about, is as important to education as oxygen is to air. Second, we have to prepare students for the tests of life and not just a life of tests. Third, represented by a wonderful quote that I love from Mark Twain, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you know why. Think about that one. And finally, the fact that inspiration must precede remediation. And this has implications for every one of us working in schools at Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3. So let me go into a little more detail on all of these things. This, by the way, is where I am at the Rutgers University Social, Emotional, and Character Development Lab. And it's not a coincidence that it's the Social, Emotional, and Character Development Lab and not the SEL lab. We used to be that, but we changed. And my contact information, should you be interested in following up with me at any point in time, which I would welcome. You'll see this when you get the PowerPoint. So SEL is not something that has been invented by anybody. SEL is a term that describes our competencies for getting along with other people in the world. And, over many, many years, literally over hundreds and hundreds of years, people have had different ways of talking about this. We now talk about it as social emotional learning. But what that really means is that it's not something that comes in a program. It's not something that somebody has created. And so, when we see all this backlash against SEL, to me, it's as silly to think about taking SEL out of your school as it would be to say that you're going to take oxygen out of the air. Once you take oxygen out of the air, you don't have air. And once you take SEL out of a school environment, you don't have a school, because everything that happens in a school is mediated by relationships. So why is SEL a universal catalyst? Well, it's because SEL helps our valued outcomes to happen. Now, we may differ in what our valued outcomes are, and that's important. Nevertheless, without SEL, we're not going to get those valued outcomes to happen. Why? Because the outcomes that we care about are interpersonal. And so if we're not working effectively interpersonally, we're not going to get what we want to get to. And another big insight that we've learned is that skills are essential, but they're not enough. Some of you may have seen the work of William Damon at Stanford University, who talks about noble purpose or positive purpose as a stable and generalized intention to accomplish something that is at once meaningful to the self and a positive consequence to the world beyond the self. What Damon is onto is the fact that we all have a purpose. And that purpose is not just about ourselves. It is about us being contributors to people around us and the world around us. And I would say to you that this is a missing piece in our conversations about the mental health of students. Indeed, we talk about them in a way that doesn't recognize the inherent need of each child to be a contributor, to be a source of positive influence on other people. Every kid has that need. And when that need is not being met, it's not surprising to see turns toward negative behavior, whether it's internalizing behavior or externalizing behavior. People want to contribute. So what does that mean for us? It changes our role. Can we see ourselves as igniters of our students' purpose for positive character, contribution, compassion, and citizenship? This is what every child wants in Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So when we say inspiration must precede remediation, we mean that we try to fix kids before we try to inspire them, that we try to modify their behavior without trying to uplift their soul. And when our kids have inspiration, they are much more likely to want to learn new skills, change their behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So it's shifting our focus a little bit from behavior management, if you will, to purpose provision, purpose stimulation, purpose catalyst. So this is why I love this quote from Mark Twain, that the two most important days of your life are the day you know you're born and the day you know why. Now, the literature on this, so let's just be clear about this. It's not like a fourth and fifth grader has a stable life purpose. They don't. But having a purpose at any point in our lives gives us grounding. And there will be things that happen in our lives that make us rethink our purpose. Maybe we can't be what we thought we could be. Maybe what we thought we wanted to be, we try it out, and that's not what we want to be. So during those times when our sense of purpose is unclear or uncertain, indeed, we feel destabilized. Indeed, our mental health is a little shaky. We are at our best when we're anchored with a sense of positive purpose. And again, if you think about middle school in particular, this is a time when kids' sense of who they are and what they can do fluctuate dramatically. Developmentally, the middle school kids often are in a cognitive stage, where they exaggerate and catastrophize. So, 1 minute, everything's clear and great. The next minute, everything's the pits. The next minute, things are great again, but in a different way. We have to understand that for a lot of kids, they don't have a sense of what their purpose might be. When we think about kids who are disadvantaged, part of their disadvantage is the fact that their sense of possibility is diminished. And so if we inspire kids, give them that sense of possibility, we will find our schools to feel like very, very different places, and our relationships with kids to change into much more positive and facilitating. So why have we come to this term of social, emotional, and character development? It's a realization that in the journey of life, if you think of an analogy of a boat, the sail captures the wind and moves us forward. And maybe sometimes we have a propeller that moves us forward. But what steers us? What steers us? It is our virtues and our character, our values that steer us. And so in the journey of life, we want to have propulsion and direction. We need social, emotional, and character development. It's also important to have a destination. That's where positive purpose comes in. When we're steered toward positive purpose, when we feel like we can accomplish something, that's incredibly powerful for us. When kids don't feel they have any purpose, their journey becomes quite aimless. And when kids feel that the only option open to them is negative purpose, well, that's the direction they go in, because nobody wants to just kind of be sailing around aimlessly. So it's so important for us to nurture positive purpose in kids. And what is the school climate? Well, that's what determines how well this journey is going to go. Even the best boat is unlikely to survive in an awful climate. And so that's why interventions that may be evidence-based are not implementation-proof. That's why we need to have schools that are organized in ways that have positive, caring, supportive climates, because then our best work can move forward in the direction that we want. So this is why we say social, emotional, and character development help us reach our positive purposes. But whatever vehicle we have, whether it's an SEL program, or character program, or whatever we're thinking of doing, it will not be successful if the climate is not conducive to that. And now we also have to think about the fact that we've been short-sighted in talking about academic achievement. We must prepare our kids for the tests of life, not only a life of tests. And how true has the pandemic shown us this statement to be? If you look closely on the bottom, you'll see the statement was written after 9/11. And this was because, once again, we came to realize that we have to prepare our kids to be citizens of the world as it is and to make this world better. And so our kids are going to need to have some pretty important skills, the skills of SEL, of problem solving, of empathy, of emotion management and recognition, of planning and organization, of focus, of being able to work in groups. These skills are all essential, and they're especially important when we find ourselves in crisis. And we are still in the midst of crisis because of the pandemic. So when I go to schools, they look to me a lot like the schoolhouse on the top. Schoolhouse on the top is a schoolhouse that has a lot of programs, and many of them are evidence-based programs. Many of them are wonderful, fantastic programs. But, you know, every time a new mandate comes along, we slap in another program. We're doing so many different things. We're doing too many things. And I once was presenting to a group of superintendents of school, and one of them raised his hand in the back and he said, I got it. I said, well, what do you got? He said, it's like gardening. Well, I was born in the Bronx. I don't know very much about gardening, but I am a psychologist. So I said, tell me more. So he starts telling me more. And he said, you know, a school is like a patch of garden. You can only plant so many plants in that garden, even if they're fantastic plants, because otherwise they choke each other off. And that's a lot of what's happening in our schools. We've got jumbled schoolhouses where many, many great things are there, but too many great things are there. And then, you know, what's also interesting, just as a parenthetical, you know what always grows in a garden? Weeds. We got a lot of weeds too. We've got a lot of things that we brought into our schools at one point or another. There was a mandate, there was a partial mandate. Someone had a kind of a hot topic or something. We've got to go through and prune some of these things in our schools so that we've got room for the things that really matter. So now along comes SEL. And when we think of SEL as a program, it very often just adds to the jumble. But when we think of SEL as something that gets added into everything we do, added in and not on, well, then we have the capability of getting to the schoolhouse at the bottom, where social, emotional, and character development is kind of the overarching framework, where the school has core values that it stands for, where academic skills and literacies, while of course the main thing a school is concerned about, rests on a foundation of service and character, that we want our kids to take their knowledge and put it to work for good. That is what's going to catalyze them to learn even math. And then the rooms on the side of the schoolhouse: violence prevention, alcohol, tobacco, and other drug education, sex education, health education. This reflects the fact that when kids are scared, they can't learn. When kids are drug and alcohol involved, they can't learn effectively. If they're involved in premature sexual behavior, they're not going to learn optimally. And if they're not in good health, they're not going to learn optimally. So schools can't afford to not attend to those issues, because if they don't attend to those issues, what's going to suffer? Academic achievement. That's why we can't just prepare our kids for the tests of life, for a life of tests, because all these other things matter tremendously. So if any of this was true before, it is even more true now under the conditions of volatility, uncertainty, chaos, and adversity, VUCA, that COVID has brought right to our doorstep. It has roiled our climate, but we can focus and bring ourselves to a much better place if we don't think of SEL as something that gets added on to everything else, but rather woven into everything we do. And so what we need to be looking for now especially is how do we bring SEL into literally all academic subject areas? And there are many, many great examples that we can draw upon in social studies, history, current events, visual and performing arts, language arts. Indeed, I want to focus for a moment on social studies and civics and history, because we are at a time in our society where kids' voices need to be heard and developed, where our kids need to be involved in carefully thinking about and discussing the social issues around us, that our kids are going to inherit our democracy. And what we want them to inherit is the best of our democracy and not polarization. We want our kids to know how to speak to each other. We want our kids to know how to think critically and with nuance. We want our kids to know how to engage in long-term planning and problem solving. And all of that is SEL. And so if we integrate instructional strategies that promote that kind of development in our students, we are going to make them better at their subject matter, and we're going to make them better in terms of their social, emotional, and character development. So this all comes under the rubric of what we in our lab call students taking action together. And in this new book, ASCD publication, we present 5 instructional strategies that can be woven into every subject area, and they fit in the curriculum that you already have. So it's not about what your curriculum, no one telling you what your curriculum has to be. It's just saying, how do we present our curriculum to optimize building our students' capacity for being successful citizens in the 21st century and beyond? So let me give you one example. One of the instructional strategies is respectful empathic debate. Now, again, I'm oversimplifying in the interest of time, but I hope you'll see what we're getting at here. Debate has always been a part of what happens in schools. And yet, if we're honest, we recognize that a lot of times, especially now, kids prepare their debates, and the other team, other group is presenting their side, and the team that's going to go next is not listening to what they're saying. All they're worried about is their presentation. I think we all know how kids now, when they're in a group context, very often are just waiting to say what they have to say and not really listening to what their peers have to say. In a respectful empathic debate, one side presents its argument. The other side, their first task, replicate that argument in detail. Because it's only by listening carefully to other people, thinking about what they're saying, that we can best arrive at our own positions. Otherwise, we keep talking to ourselves, saying the same things, getting the same ideas, and that's not going to help us move forward. It's not going to help us as a school to come together. It's not going to help us as a community. It's not going to help us as a society. So in a respectful empathic debate, side 1 presents, side 2 listens and replicates. They may then modify what they were going to say, then they present, and the first side has to respond by replicating what they just heard from the other team. So this takes time. You don't do respectful debates all the time, but as you put this in the curriculum, and kids do it periodically over the course of middle school and high school, you're building a tremendous skill set in the kids. And that skill set will also deepen their understanding about whatever it is that they're studying. We have other techniques, including a problem-solving framework called PLAN, and something called audience-focused communication, which, again, to summarize, is how do we help kids understand that they have an audience a context for their presentations, and they have to take the perspective of the other, not to say what they want to say in the way they want to say it, but to think about the position of the listener and to begin to modify how they're going to do it in light of the other person's reality. So again, these are skills that can be built in the kids, but they fit into everything that's going on right now. They're added in and not on. So those are the four basic things, the four big ideas that I think broaden out our understanding of social, emotional, and character development. And you can see lots of examples of these things at the website of our secdlab.org.
This is what I love about these office hours. Maurice, you just presented four big ideas, but there's so much more for us to really dive into and kind of dig into a lot of those four big areas. I'm going to cue so many questions on in my mind. Jeremy, I was smiling on my end here because, quite honestly, Dr. Elias, I know you don't know this, but these are conversations that myself, Jeremy, George have been having. I think about when you talk about that, the sense of purpose, and we're going to dive into that in just a couple of minutes of why that's so important. We talk about in our adult lives, that sense of purpose and what we're really searching for. I love how you emphasize everyone needs these skills. And that's why we're talking about it at the tier 1 level, because these are universal skills. These are something everyone really needs to be learning. And I want to pick up on kind of with your last points there of the add in, not add on. And that's something I have been preaching for such a long time, because you're right. Our schools, we have lots of different programs. We have lots of different things going on. And you come into a teacher's classroom and say, I got a great program, want to add on in your classroom. And I know I've used this example in the past, but they simply say, great, John, tell me where, but I'm not doing it because I got so many other things going on.
Right. For us, the things that are familiar to us and obvious to us are innovations to others. And so if we don't recognize that, then we're going to be shooting ourselves in the foot, basically, because especially now, educators are under so many pressures, and so we have to be. The literature is very clear that the optimal way to teach SEL is a both and. That there's a program, there's SEL instruction or character instruction. There's something like that, and then there's the adding in piece. But the reality is that now it's not going to happen, and we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so that's why that's why if we want to engage teachers and we want to get them to see that this can be helpful to them right now, then we have to be focusing on the adding in and not on.
I also like that concept a lot. You talk about the instructional strategies that can be implemented into the normal course of the day for these educators. And I'd love to learn if you have an example of an instructional strategy that an administrator or a teacher could walk away with today, incorporating that social emotional learning into their day. And I'd love to hear some of your ideas and examples.
Sure. So I'll give you one. And I just want to preface it by saying that another thing that we talk about is the fact that we don't have to be teaching SEL as much as activating SEL, because the SEL is already there. Everybody's got it.
It's in us.
It's in us.
Yes.
So these strategies activate the SEL. So people say, well, my God, if the kid hasn't had SEL instruction, how can you activate it? Well, you can, because SEL's already there. So here's the simplest of the instructional techniques. And I'll give you a specific example. If you're doing a lesson, a unit on gangs, You open the conversation with your students by putting a statement there for them to look at. Statement, gangs can give people a sense of purpose. Right? And then you ask the kids, do you agree with that? Do you say yes to that statement? Do you disagree? Do you say no? Or are you in the fence? Do you say maybe? And then you say to the kids, okay, if you think yes, go to that side of the room. If you think no, go to that side of the room. If you think maybe, go to the back of the room. Once you get there, pick 2 or 3 other people and have a conversation about why did you say yes? Why did you say no? Why did you say maybe? And then kids do that. And then we ask the little groups to report out. And we hear, this is why they said yes, they said yes. It could be that everybody said yes, but that doesn't matter, because even if everybody said yes, there will be many different reasons why people said yes or no or maybe. Right? After everybody has reported out, you ask them to sit down, you thank them, and then you sit down. No summarizing, no evaluating. What are you doing? You are encouraging peer opinion sharing. You are encouraging kids to share their opinions, feel like they can share their opinions, and hear other people's opinions. You're encouraging a mixing of kids that may not talk to each other typically, and they're sharing some important stuff. Now, we do this in our team meetings and adult meetings, because again, you could put a statement. A statement could be, we think our mission should be this. You think yes? No? Maybe? And then, right, after that goes on, you then go into your lesson structure. That took 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. You go into your lesson structure and your kids read about gangs. And then after they've read and done what you want them to do, you bring them back into a yes, no, maybe. And they reevaluate their opinion on that statement. And did they change their mind? Didn't they change their mind? They changed their mind, a different reason. Again, this can fit into anything. It can fit into history. Another prominent one that we've used is the statement. Again, you're not endorsing the statement, you're just putting it out there. The United States Civil War was not fought for reasons of slavery, but for economics. Yes, no, maybe. Right. And you know what the most popular one is? We once asked middle school kids that we were working with in.
I'm waiting with bated. I'm very interested.
Yeah, the big issue to them was cafeteria food.
Of course.
So the yes, no, maybe.
It's every middle school student. That's
right?
important.
That's my biggest concern before lunch.
Right. So the yes, no, maybe was, in essence, there's nothing you could do about the food that's being served in the cafeteria. Yes, no, maybe. But the whole point here is to begin to activate activism in the kids, because they don't know what to do when they're faced with a problem. And we get a lot of complaining and not a lot of sense of action. So you can jump from that yes, no, maybe into the plan strategy, where the kids begin to define the problem, brainstorm solutions, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things that that they're not a big deal, but they have tremendous applicability, and they are what we need now, because right now, peer opinion sharing doesn't happen very well. And respectful listening doesn't happen very well. And that's the foundation.
It's fascinating you bring that up, Maurice, because I know I've shared in previous conversations, I'm currently living and working in St. Croix, helping to develop some social emotional programs, working directly with students and teachers, things of that nature. And I want to share just a very, very quick story that literally just happened the other day. I was in a classroom with a teacher. She's a wonderful teacher. And she had stepped out of the room for a moment. And as soon as she came back in, one of the students came up to her and said, Mrs. So-and-so, Johnny said this about my hair. And instead of saying to the class or to that other student, you did something wrong, or you shouldn't say that, or that's bad, she stopped the entire class and she said, let's talk about opinions. And everyone can have an opinion. It doesn't mean that you accept their opinion or you agree with their opinion, but Johnny had an opinion about your hair. It doesn't mean he's right. Doesn't mean that you have to accept it. And she just went on to this beautiful, very short dialogue with the class about how we deal with that type of conflict. And it was a great little vignette of conflict management, of problem solving, all of these social emotional concepts that here I'm trying to get everyone to buy into. And she just demonstrated my point within a 2-3 minute conversation there.
Right. Right.
And that's why I love the concept of the adding in. It's something you can do on the fly like that. You can incorporate it into your lessons, things of that nature.
Right. But it is important though to note that of course there are people that do this. Again, did we invent the yes, no, maybe? No, people have been doing this kind of thing. Did we invent the respectful debate? No, people have been doing that kind of thing. But it's haphazard. If you happen to have this great teacher, you're going to get it. But next year, maybe not. And all of these things are skills that need to accumulate. And so the kids need exposure to them over the course of a year and then over the course of multiple years. That's the challenge to our schools and our school administrators. That oh yeah, this is going on. Yes, it's going on, but it's going on sporadically. If reading was going on sporadically, you would have a school full of illiterate children. And so when social, emotional, and character development goes on sporadically, you then have kids with not particularly good character and problem solving skills. And we can and should be expecting better because we know how important these things are. I mean,
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because we have learned a lot about social, emotional. Now we're adding character development. There's a lot of research and a lot of research that you have done. Thank you for all that. And others, have certainly engaged in some wonderful research. I'm wondering if you could talk about what do we know about social emotional learning that maybe we didn't know 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Well, I think one of the big advances has been the connection of social emotional learning to academic success. I think, for example, I don't know if we have math teachers out there, but math teachers teach things like algebra, calculus, things that kids often find to be difficult. So if I'm going to be faced with a difficult task and I don't have the ability to manage my emotions, what is the likelihood that I'm going to be really absorbing what you're teaching me? Not good. And I think that the idea that we teach subject matter and not children is something that really needs to be relegated to the, maybe the 19th century or something, because we do teach children. And we recognize now that no matter how good the instruction is, if the learner's on switch isn't on, you could have a longer school day. You could have a longer school year. You could have an enhanced lesson structure. It ain't getting in. And so now I think we realize that there is complete interconnectivity. All the neurological research has shown us, right? That there is complete interconnectivity between our academic, social, emotional aspects of our brain. So, I think that's been a turning point to me in what the research has revealed.
Yeah, I know I'm an adult and I am no different. If I haven't addressed my social and emotional needs, I'm not thinking as clearly. I'm not able to absorb information and knowledge.
Right.
I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I think about the social emotional learning understanding from school to school, state to state. And there seems to be different definitions, understandings, or even interpretations of what social emotional can be. And I want to couple that with what you tied together in one of your slides, which is the social emotional as well as the mental health or well-being of students. And I'm hoping that you can take just a few minutes and talk to how maybe you can clarify for this audience or this group how those are interconnected, how you think about social emotional and the tie with mental health, and help us define that a little more clearly.
Sure. Sure. Well, first I should mention I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Yes.
So I've been involved in treating people. And so then when people come in with various problems and difficulties, what are we doing? We're teaching them social and emotional skills.
Yeah.
We're teaching them these things. And so why do we have to teach it to them after the fact? Right? But these are the skills that we know are essential to good mental health. And we know that when kids are in tier 2 or tier 3, we've got to work on these things with the kids. So if we begin to do it as a primary prevention strategy, then we begin to have fewer kids who need services and fewer kids needing more intense services. And given the fact that we don't have as many service providers as we should have, and we're not likely to get them, then we have a better chance of having the system work well, because we're not overburdening folks. And so, sometimes people say, well, we're teachers, we're not mental health we're not mental health educators.
And that's a real thing. It's a real concern, Maurice. I mean,
it's a real concern.
We ask a lot of our educators, and we don't want to give them the impression that we expect them to go back and get a degree in mental health or even be able to have that knowledge and skill set, right?
Right. Well, but the reality is that every teacher, just about every teacher in every subject area, teaches problem solving to their kids. And problem solving is underlies so many things. We don't necessarily do it systematically. And so doing it a little bit more systematically will benefit, again, your valued outcomes. It enhances your valued outcomes. So as a teacher, if you emphasize some of these instructional techniques, you will get better results in your music class, your art class, your PE class, your health class. And at the same time, you'll be building the skills that will help your students' mental health. But it's not going to be something that you're doing that's outside of your own domain of expertise.
I like that.
That's such a critical point, I think, that you're bringing up, Maurice, because Jeremy, you're absolutely correct. And it's often something we hear from our teacher colleagues. Well, I'm not a mental health professional. I shouldn't be, addressing mental health issues. Well, the reality is, teachers are in the classroom and they're dealing with all kinds of issues, mental health, issues certainly being one of them. But, I think I don't want to lose this point that Jeremy, you're bringing out, and certainly Maurice, you're highlighting, that when we teach these skills, these are not mental health skills, these are life skills. And that's a critical piece. And when we teach them these life skills, it has benefits for mental health. I often like to distinguish between say that mental health is a spectrum, mental wellness all the way to mental illness. And, the social emotional learning competencies, and now bringing in character, it's all about emotional wellness and teaching emotional wellness. And I think that's part of all of our jobs that are there.
I think you're right. And I like the idea of prevention, because prevention does start at tier 1. It starts universally, and incorporating these instructional strategies. And your example of problem solving, all of us use problem solving in our instruction. We have to.
Right.
All of us can teach a yes, no, maybe in our instruction. All of us can take and activate the inner voice of a child by giving them the opportunity. And we live in I think the challenge that we face oftentimes, I got 5 kids, they're all school aged. I see this firsthand every day. And the struggle to learn is real because of friends, food, conflict, disagreements, all distract. And if we're just teaching subject matter as opposed to the child, and we're not helping them to to learn as they're processing their life, they're always going to see life and learning as separate events,
Right, right.
right?
But
Whereas life
the-
and learning is so interconnected.
right. The hidden secret is, though, that they'll get better in their subject areas.
Yes.
That's the hidden secret. So we're working right
Okay.
now in New Jersey with specifically on the integration of social, emotional, and visual and performing arts. There are certain standards for visual and performing arts education and standards for social emotional learning. And the educational teams have crosswalked these completely. And the results, we're starting to do some research on this now, but we can already see the synergy of this. For example, anyone who's producing art of any kind is going to get criticized. I mean, that's just a part of it. And so if you don't know how to respond well to criticism, if you can't manage your emotions, how are you going to succeed? How are you going to get better in your art if you can't hear what people are saying to you about it? And that's just one example, but we can go down the list. If you don't have the ability to understand a range of emotions, how are you going to appreciate art fully? I don't think you will. So we can go on, but the point is that the crosswalk is not about SEL, it's about making kids better in the visual and performing arts. And that's the hidden secret.
And the research is very clear, and you highlighted this, and I always try to really bring this out, that when we teach these skills, it improves students' academic performance. That's the incredible tie-in for teachers to hear, for our administrative colleagues to hear. You know, I want to branch into, and Jeremy, you kind of alluded to this when you were talking about your own family and the challenges, you know, character. You talked before, we talked about social emotional learning. Now we're talking about social, emotional, and character development. Why character? Why has it been added to social emotional learning competencies?
Yeah, again, we have to understand that we don't live in a values neutral world. And so every curriculum, every intervention has a value structure in it. And so the idea of talking about character development is about talking about our shared values. So for example, we think now that it's critical for every classroom to have a set of core values that they articulate. For example, cooperation, kindness, respect, support. Those are core values. And as we articulate those, we then hold each other accountable. And we also have an interest in teaching kids how to be that. So for example, when a kid doesn't act in a cooperative way, we can label the kid as uncooperative, or we can ask ourselves, does this kid have the skills to know how to cooperate with others? And our kids and our teachers also want to go to schools that stand for something. You know, a lot of schools have names. You know, there are a lot of Martin Luther King schools, John F. Kennedy schools, but they don't often live up to their names. Sad to say, I went to Flushing High School. It did live up to its name, but that's a whole other story. But people want to walk 180 school days to something that's meaningful. I work with a school that their motto is, we are the learning place where dreams are born, caring is shown, and leaders are made.
That's
all right. So this is a place people want to work. This is a place people want to go to. The values, we value dreams, aspirations. We value caring. We value leadership. And then we build things around that. No school can do everything. So we make some choices and then we focus. You know, private schools do that all the time. Private schools have mottos and, right, they have a focus. They want to turn out a certain kind of graduate. Our public schools also should be talking about what kind of people do we want to turn out here?
I'm glad you go this direction, because every organization needs these core values well defined. And I think that where most organizations may fail is the point of defining to implementing those core values, because the core values should lead to consistent behaviors.
Right.
I've been in scenarios where the core values are written and preached, and then the behaviors contradict those core values.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
that's the wrong message. And our students see that message.
They
And
do.
I love that you're talking about core values even in classrooms and establishing those expectations, because it establishes the behavioral expectation as well.
We establish it together, and then we review it.
Yeah.
We review it every marking period. We say, let's take a look. We got to make some adjustments here so that we work better, work more effectively. We'll make some adjustments. Everybody owns it. It's not imposed. It's not forever. It's dynamic.
Mhm.
And that's the society we live in. That's what our kids have to be ready for. They're not going to live in a society where things are just going to happen one way in perpetuity. They've got to get used to changes, and they've got to get used to participating in changes, learning how to articulate their position, make statements about what they think, what they want. And then when they don't get their way, not tear down the house.
Boy, no true statement has been made, and certainly a timely statement as well. Maurice, these hours always go by so quickly. I wish we certainly had more. I don't want to leave this conversation though without talking about how do we really help students develop that sense of purpose? I said before, not jokingly, but as adults, we think about at times we struggle with our purpose and how that impacts us. I'm wondering if you could share a couple quick thoughts on how do we help students develop that sense of purpose?
I can, and I will say, if people want to follow up with me, we've got a lot of materials to do this. But there's a trajectory for this to happen. The first way it happens is to look at the purpose of others. So when kids read biographies, you help them trace the evolving purpose of the person they're reading about. When they're reading a book, even a kid's book, as young as preschool, first grade, you can say to them, what was the cat in the hat? What was the cat's goal? What was the cat trying to do? So the language shifts from goals to purpose as the kids get older. But we can have them look and see that in books they read, in biographies they read, in events, they can begin to label purpose in others. And then again, we have kids talk to people about their purpose. We have them interview their parents and family members about their sense of purpose. We bring in first responders and community members to talk about their sense of purpose. And then we get the kids to start to write about their sense of purpose, and often use other modalities such as visual and performing arts to express their sense of purpose. And so again, there is a sort of a developmental trajectory to this that we can lead kids down. But when I said inspiration precedes remediation, I mean that when we work with kids, before we try to fix them, we should try to help them articulate, who do you want to be like? Who do you want to be like? And what are they like? And what do we know about them? And what are their skills? And help kids begin to aspire. So then when they're working, they're not working for you. They're not working for their IEP. They're working because they begin to see possibilities for themselves.
What a way to end the conversation. Although I don't want to end it, we are running up against the hour, and the message that you just shared there, Maurice, is just so critical. And I think as educators, it's something for us to kind of pause and really think about how do we help kids see and develop that sense of purpose in their lives, and how do we kind of, to borrow a phrase from another colleague, hack deficit thinking. How do we really help kids to understand the positives and really see the positives in themselves? Just such a critical skill at this point in time. I want to I know you've highlighted a couple of times, but for folks that are looking for additional information, how to do this, research behind it, can you just mention again some of the links that may be available? And we'll follow up and send out some links as a follow-up to this conversation.
Well, the lot of work being done on this with William Damon's lab on purpose, a lot of intervention stuff. At our lab, a social emotional character development lab, we have a project called Mosaic, and available to anybody, download for free, a curriculum for secondary level, a 3-year curriculum that focuses explicitly on the development of a sense of purpose and the associated competencies to help you get to that sense of purpose. Because again, these things, that's why it's social, emotional, and character development. We want to give kids aspirations, but also the skills to get there.
Yeah.
And if they have skills, we want them to be directed towards some positive goals. So again, if folks want to reach me at my website, I'm more than happy to respond to their particular requests for information of certain age levels, certain populations, et cetera.
And I want folks to really believe that Dr. Elias means that. I think that was one of the original ways that I connected with him, was just simply reaching out over some mutual interests. And Dr. Elias, you are always very gracious with your time. This is not only a passion, but it is truly who Dr. Elias is.